Today, we had some long conversations about awk, bash, and the future of scripting, as well as platforms and the rise and fall of Kubernetes.
The fall of Kubernetes. I'll have Claude write a new one.
Of course, you will. I'm sure you were in the middle of telling Claude to do that during the recording, actually. Our guest, Evelyn Osmond, spoke recently at Cloud Native Munich about all kinds of good stuff, including whether everyone needs platforms and asking why. She also got into a long conversation with David on Blue Sky about awk.
We decided that you need to be this old to know what awk is. So if you're as old as us, you pass the test.
We also discussed why, like the question. Asking why is the most important skill you should have.
Like, why are we using Kubernetes? Why are we paying for the cloud? And why are you listening to this?
That last one, maybe I don't have a good answer for. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Cloud Native Compass. Today we're joined by Evelyn. Evelyn is a head of platform, likes awk, which is why we're here. I'll get into that more in a moment. But before we talk about fun command line shenanigans, platforms, operations, and anything else that grabs our interest throughout the session, could you please take a moment just to say hello to our audience and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, David. Yeah, so as you said, I'm the head of platform at an energy trade startup in Munich, Germany, called NMAC. So I've been there since end of last year, working on a variety of topics and like building out the internal platform. Basically the platform engineering setup. I do the platform as a product. So the idea is like everything we build has like users, functions, use cases that we support. I also kind of do the whole thing of like we should be honest, and actually at some point we look back and decide, yeah, actually this is a bad idea. We should do it over again. We always be honest. Like avoid the graveyard as much as possible, so to speak. Yeah. And I guess maybe some things I'm working on recently, I guess. So I guess I'm diving more into like sort of like release management is one thing. Another one is sort of like, like data architectures, how to improve those, make them more reliable, but that's sort of like more like, bringing in best practices. And I guess the other thing, I've been working really high level for a very long time. So I'm actually thankfully finally getting back to actually writing code, which I'm very happy about. Avoiding vibe coding as much as I can. Sorry if I brought it up, but I don't use it. I just don't.
As David looks off screen at his coding
It's still going.
agent.
Still
Anyway.
going. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, good.
All right. Now, let's not start the podcast by dating you, but we started talking, and this podcast came together because I was talking about awk and how powerful it is. And I feel like in today's day and age, and I said like an old man yelling at cloud already, right? Not a lot of people are really playing with awk and sed and even regex to some degree. It seems to be people that have been doing this for a while that are familiar with these tools, because at one point it's pretty much all we had. So I'm assuming you've been doing this a while, you've used awk, you like awk, you're probably a tinkerer and a script writer. So maybe you can give us a bit more history on you with regards to these tools and what you've been up to over the however many years you've been doing this.
Yeah, so I started working in tech in like 2006, 2007 when I needed to pay the bills, and basically like good old American, college, got to work your way through it to pay tuition. And so I just was like, I basically worked a lot of different jobs from like desktop support, help desk. Actually, at one point I was managing a data center, like a lot of different things. And so as a result, I was doing a lot of, like basically sitting in a console a lot of the time. And with awk, it was like, actually at the time I was working for a company that did a lot of like, data streaming, data analytics. And so we had just these like, I think at the time it was Cloudera and Hortonworks. So it was both of those, like Hadoop clusters. And we were like basically working in a demo. And one of the things was basically like, okay, we actually want to just basically like consume, all the access logs from Wikipedia every day. And we're going to do some manipulation on it, some transformation. And then we're just going to dump it into Hadoop and then do some analytics for some pretty dashboards with heat maps and NLP and all that crap. And I ended up writing everything in awk.
Yes.
I don't even know why I did it. It was at first I was like, okay, I need to start parsing things. Okay, now I did parse. Okay, I got to iterate through it. And I was like, can I do this in awk? And the next thing I know, I had like a 200-line script.
I love it.
I mean, there's going to be people listening that just think, what, you can write awk scripts? It's not just print $1, etc., or field separators. But yeah, it's so powerful. So.
Yeah, like I do a lot of conditionals usually when I'm using awk and stuff, or like, yeah, and it's something interesting because like I kind of saw, like you kind of mentioned like like angry man yelling at cloud and stuff, but I kind of observed this like over the years as like cloud became a thing. I always say like I was like with my company for my team like 3 people sat down like we should use AWS, and I was like no, we should not. It has all these IO performance issues. It's super inconsistent. We do like data analytics. It's a terrible decision. 2 years later, I was designing like the architecture for one of our platforms. So you kind of saw how that went. But I kind of started seeing like people like learning, like understanding less and less about what was happening behind the scenes. And first it was like, like architecture, infrastructure, okay, I'm creating a VPC with subnets. I'm like, okay, how do you do subnetting? They're like, I don't know what that is. They're like, okay, tell me about TCP UDP. They didn't know what that is. And now it's kind of like, gotten to the point where I see a lot of people like they don't know how to write a script.
No, they don't.
And I'm like okay, but I'm usually just writing little scripts. Like actually, coincidentally, last night I was talking to my wife about the Cloud Native Summit that I spoke at yesterday in Munich, and I was just kind of like, very high energy. Came back from the conference talk high. And I started chatting about all these things, and I started explaining, like, Python scripting and how to do object-oriented. And she's like, what is that? And I just whipped out my laptop.
Oh, boy.
And I just started writing her hello worlds and, like, Bash and then Python and showing her the difference. And she is not a technical person.
I mean, when you're on that conference talk high, though, like, it doesn't matter. You're going to show whether anybody gets it or not.
Yeah. And I
love it.
And bless her heart, she was like really focused and listening. And,
yes.
Yeah. And like, she's amazing. I'm just going to say that right up front. Yeah. But like, I mean, like, but I'm like looking, back into like where I work and like where I previously worked is, like, yes, in this day and age, a lot of like managed services, everything's in the cloud. We're kind of pushing people more towards like, can you do programming? And that's kind of pushes people towards like Python, TypeScript, and everything. And it kind of leaves behind Bash, which kind of has like a negative reputation or stereotype. In some cases, very well justified. Like I have seen a script that was basically piping echo to cat to grep into sed and then finally into awk. And I think they were just grabbing things from like Stack Overflow or something.
Okay.
Oh, Stack Overflow.
Yeah. I mean, like, where's the difference now between like these AI generated code things and just copying from Stack Overflow, right? Maybe.
I want to say
trolling David a little bit,
I'm going to say like one of them is like very enthusiastic of saying like, yes, this is correct, and the other one is like, I don't really know why this works, but it works, and other people are like, yeah, it's weird, but it works.
Right.
At least they're honest.
Right. Yeah. I love those answers on Stack Overflow, the ones where it's like, so if you do this and you shake this bell over here near the computer on this side, somehow magically it works, but you'd have to press this Konami code into your terminal and it just magically works. Don't ask me why. Just use that. And everybody's like, yes, +1. This works. This fixed everything. I love those answers because it just never makes sense.
One time I found like an undocumented like flag for Tomcat through Stack Overflow that fixed my issues.
I love it.
I mean, Stack Overflow used to be fantastic and there was a lot of knowledge on there. I'm not surprised the AI models are now, I assume they've been trained on the majority of Stack Overflow, but while there is a lot of, there's a lot, but it's a small percentage of the content on Stack Overflow is good. I can also imagine that it has a very net negative effect on AI model training because there's a lot of outdated garbage on there too. I mean, I haven't been on Stack Overflow for probably 10 years, and every time I look at my profile, because sometimes I still hit my own answers, which is really annoying, it still says I'm in the top 2% of people that answer questions, and I haven't been on it for a decade. So
yeah, no, that's true. I still occasionally just get badges from Stack Overflow. I haven't touched it in so long.
Your prized possession, but you have to print them out and put them on your wall. So
there you go.
I think what I enjoy so far about your history and your context and where you are today, right, is that you quite clearly are like a T-shaped individual, a curious individual. I prefer to say. I know T-shaped is probably a very loaded term these days, but you like to learn lots and lots of things, and I'm sure you go deep on certain aspects as well. But I also think that that's a dying breed in these days and age, even more so with AI, because people don't really need to learn anything. I mean, there was that new Warp Terminal announcement last week where it's like, just push tab and tell the AI what you want to do. And like, people use it to run LS. At least one of the demos was list of files in this directory. And I'm like, that took 4 seconds.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm like, have they not heard of ZSH? Or,
Like,
like, once again, there's so many tools that do this for you.
And while I am very much on board with AI augmented programming, I do it every single day. I'm having it do the things that I don't want to do, but I'm not having it do the things that I'm quite clearly capable of doing immediately, like running LS. So, I think the way that developers, and I know I'm way off track now, but I'm going to bring it back, is like, I think it's very interesting to see the developers now that are junior developers and mid-tier developers that haven't went completely tree-shaped and being curious and learned 1,000 different technologies, because I think that by learning the wrong technologies, you understand and appreciate why the right technologies work. Is that when they just go to AI and say, how do I build that data lake, right? Hopefully this is something we can have a conversation on. Not that I'm fully good with this stuff. They just get an answer, they take it as gospel, that is the one, and they haven't learned 1,000 other ways that it didn't work and why they got to this one. And I'm very worried about that aspect of how AI is going to change. And we can loop it into platform engineering too, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there today that just go, I want to build a self-service platform for my developers. And it's like, hey, you need Backstage with Kubernetes and microservices. And then they just go and have AI write a manifesto, email it to all the execs, get buy-in, get $100,000 bonus, and then job done. Like this has the whole world of being potentially bad. I don't know. There's not even a question in there, but let's.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So like in this talk, I do, like I put together last year for a meetup, and I've managed to give it at 2 conferences. I don't know why they said yes, but like for people listening, like I have this talk that I say, converging on platforms, where every organization eventually builds a platform without really intending to or wanting to, because it's basically at some point they need to have some commonalities in what they're doing. And I kind of also talk about like, how do you actually make it succeed, and what are your common like dead ends in it. And one of the things that I really kind of hammer when I'm talking about, you eventually end up with it because organizations are kind of like, they're chasing that revenue, dream of like, we're gonna make so much money if we deliver this really fast. And they kind of forget that there's also people working there. And so like, we're going to do agile, and people are like, okay, like, but we still want rigid timelines, and we want to have a focused framework for planning everything out. I'm like, that's not agile. And then eventually, like, we're going to do Spotify model because it helps you be autonomous, but we're going to do lots of check-ins with every single guild and chapter to make sure they're doing the right work. I'm like, that's not autonomous. And then we're going to do a team topology because it makes things better. It fixes all the issues you had with the Spotify model, but we're going to do all these things. I'm like, well, you're still kind of breaking it. I can go on forever about this.
Yeah.
But it's only when they kind of realize like, oh, we should actually be empowering them to actually make independent decisions, but also make decisions that follow what we want, that golden path that we all talk about. But anyway, so one of the things I always kind of hammer is like, think about the people, but also think about like the why or the motivation. Like I always talk about the golden circle, from Simon Sinek. It's like it's easy to define like the what. Like, what are you doing? We're building a platform. How are we going to do it? We're going to do Kubernetes with Backstage. We're going to use Datadog for some metrics. And you click a button, you got everything running with all your metrics and SLOs. I'm like, well, why are you going to do that? And oftentimes they just don't. And I think that's like also kind of an important thing. We're kind of looking at like people relying heavily on AI, and like, there's not really that. I think there still is a curious side of it, but the curious side of it tends to get reinforced by AI saying like, this is a great solution for you. Mm-hmm. You take this one, they're like, oh my God, thank you. You just saved me so much time. And then 5 minutes later, it's not working. They're like, okay, all right, AI, what else should I do? Like, you should do this instead. And like, thank you so much. You made my job so much easier. and I think it's like I kind of like when I say like do platform as a product, it's because I was kind of try to break things into like doing some like discovery, doing some tinkering. Um, like I do the whole diverge, converge, like figure out like we build a hypothesis, what we think might work, and then we just like explore what solutions might work for that hypothesis. And then we just try them all out. And then we eventually figure out like one or two that actually make sense. And then we just kind of go with those. Or we pick one of the two and we go forward with it. And I think that's the thing that's kind of thing that I'm kind of seeing missing is because people, they rely so heavily on just getting an answer that they forget that there actually are multiple answers that they should actually consider.
Yeah.
All right. I've got 2 points on that because that was fantastic, right? The first one is thank you for mentioning Simon Sinek, because I don't think we've ever mentioned why or Simon on this podcast before. Is that right, Laura? And I will single-handedly say, like, it's probably the most important book I've ever read in my life because it touches every aspect of my life. And I'll give more context on that in a second. It's like, when you read that book, you can apply it in your home life, your family life, even my parenting life, my work life, everything. Because just asking that one simple question of why are we doing this is really important. And the reason I think it's important in this specific conversation with platforms and engineering culture in general is because all the things, all the tranches, no, that's not the right word, all the waves we've seen, right, over the last 20 years, whether it be agile, DevOps, platform engineering, observability, SRE, GitOps. I mean, I could list them all, but we'd be here for a while and it wouldn't be very entertaining. Well, I mean, hopefully. I could make it entertaining.
It might be entertaining, David. You don't know that.
I could like bring in a costume. But no, like all of these different, I don't want to call them movements, patterns, themes, whatever, right? They were all to some degree bottom up, and that the people doing the work understood the why and they were very successful, but then they crossed some sort of chasm and then they become this top-down thing across organizations. And I think we've seen that with especially team topologies, right? I don't think it had a lot of bottom-up movement, but Agile did, DevOps did, Kubernetes did, cloud-native microservices did. And it gets to a certain point where it gets so popular that the reason and the why is lost, and it's just pressure from C-suite pushing down. We need to be agile for capitalism, and we need to be microservices and cloud native because, well, capitalism. And when the why is capitalism, everything falls apart and it doesn't work. But these bottom-up movements, when people like yourself understand why we need to do this, and they're pushing for agile and they're pushing for platform, and all the constraints and the motivations are right, teams are going to be much more successful. That was a part rant and part context, but
yeah. Go ahead.
I need to sit with that for a second. No, I totally agree. It's because it was always like oftentimes, when I'm pushing back, it's funny. Like I kind of like built this reputation where I am right now of like, oh, Evelyn loves structure. I'm like, no. I just want to know, like, make sure we understand the why we're doing this and what and how we're going to accomplish it. So it meets. I want to make sure it meets. Because oftentimes it's like, we need to react to this. So we got to tackle this thing. I'm like, okay, but can we actually like walk through that and really kind of consider the options a bit? And it's interesting because like oftentimes when you're somebody who's like, okay, let's actually understand the why and like really discuss this and figure it out, so like let's sit down, like spend an hour just like charting out like what are the opportunities here and why do those matter to us. And then we kind of and then by the end of it, we kind of like developed, that hypothesis, that value proposition that kind of helps find the motivation within everything. And oftentimes like people think that's like I don't want to say convoluted, but it kind of slows us down. It kind of creates this very complex process. But really, it's sort of like like do we actually understand our users and what our users want?
Well, I mean, the thing is that so. Full disclosure, I currently live with an engineer. He's a computer engineer, software engineer. And so I have a very different perspective, I think, than a lot of people who came maybe out of a CS degree. There is a lot of engineering that goes into doing engineering right. And what I mean by that is that it's not supposed to be fast. If you're going that fast, you're not thinking through everything. The point of engineering is going through those whys. It is thinking through your architecture. It's thinking through what you're building. Are there alternatives? Why are we picking this one? Can you give an answer to that question? And I've seen not only him, but then some of my mentors back when I first was getting into tech were straight up engineers. And I'm talking like they're from Canada and they have the engineering ring and they get really, really picky about you using the term software engineer when you're not actually an engineer. They're those people. I
Oh,
love them to pieces. But my point is like they're really into it. And they would always be like, hey, wait a second. We need to think this through. And it's amazing how when you have somebody like that doing this and you're talking about all of those whys and all of those things, suddenly magically everything usually comes out and works. It might have some bugs, but it actually works. Instead of this move fast and break things mentality where we just kind of throw it together and say, does it work? Shove it out the door. Oh, look, it broke. It's not like that. It's more you're thinking it through. And so I don't know. I lean more towards that engineering side because to me, it's more like the scientific method. You're going through, you're testing your hypothesis, you're trying this, saying, okay, it kind of works. Let's build it. Let's see if that works. Okay, here's another option. Here's another option. Here's another option. Let's go through and pick the best one, not the one that ChatGPT told us to use yesterday. So, I mean, to me it's engineering. That is what engineering is going through and thinking all of that through and trying all the options before you build something.
Yeah, I mean, to I don't know,
I don't know.
triple down on this, right? Evelyn said something.
I'm like, I kind of
I
want to
think
dissent.
we're all in
You want to dissent? No.
we're all in agreement. You've now double clicked on that, and I'm never going to say that again. I might even edit that one out.
David.
I know. Let's zoom in on this. But
Well,
no, what I mean is like I completely agree with why Evelyn is saying this, because you need an Evelyn on your team, right? We need to understand why it's so important. Otherwise, what we end up with is, and we've seen this many times, I'm sure we've all seen this, right? Is where Google releases something because they do something internally, and then a whole bunch of engineering organizations who want to aspire to be more like Google adopt it without understanding why they actually go down that road. And then that's when the problems come down. And it's the same reason, the same thing with platform engineering. Evelyn made the right decision to ask the questions of why do we need a platform? What really happens, and a whole bunch of other organizations where people aren't asking these basic questions, really, right? Everyone should understand why they're doing what they're doing. They end up with the same copy-paste nonsense platform because they've been told that by the people selling the platforms, right? Like, I won't name any companies, but they come along and go, hey, you can have self-service, this, and this. Oh, okay, let's just install that. Okay, did we need self-service? Or did we need something else? Did we need a platform because we want to be able to spin up new microservices and we're just boilerplate? Should we be handling code generation and templating separately? Or is it because we need better secrets management? Or is it because we need a single pane of glass and then observability across disparate clusters and disparate regions and disparate clouds? But oh no, you've now got Backstage and it's got a little box where you can just say, deploy a new application. Like, the needs and dependencies and the constraints of every organization are different. I'm not saying they're snowflakes, but they are different. And when you have to understand the motivations, if you want to not just make your developers happier because they understand why they're building what they're building, but because your end users are also going to be happier because you're solving real problems that they have, and not just giving them more cognitive overload of, now I need to learn a new thing and I didn't have to do this before. Sorry, I keep ranting today.
You're good. But hold on. Evelyn, you said that you wanted to dissent. I'm actually curious. No, come on. This is the fun part, right?
Yeah. So
I want to hear it.
No. So like you like we've all heard the thing of like, oh, this is super over-engineered, and so like I agree. Like engineers, like they're generally very methodical about how they're building something, but the risk. I mean, this is always, I can tell you so many stories about ridiculous things I leaders say, where it's like, well, we need leaders to help with this problem. But it's really that like, when an engineer starts tackling a problem, oftentimes they just have the requirements and they start running forward with the requirements.
Yeah, that's
and they
true.
will build you an elegant solution for those requirements. But there's no point where it was like, okay, but why are these necessary? Or they want to be like, or they'll design to make it future-proof. To be like, okay, we're going to go, full on adapter focus so we can like swap out all the different components. We're going to do like platform agnostic. We're not going to adopt anything directly. Okay, we're going to use like the latest, tech stack, and so that's where it's like, they're very methodical about planning it out, but they can oftentimes just kind of get very distracted.
Yeah.
by what's the right way to do it. And that's why I always say, like, having that why of like, okay, well, why do I want to make these tech choices? Because I remember like a couple of years ago, I had an engineer. I was like, okay, I want you to use Fluentd to basically do some log shipping over to a Kinesis stream so we can basically publish our logs into New Relic. And then like 2 weeks later, he came back to me and he's like, here's a solution. I'm like, where's Fluentd? And he's like, oh, well, I wanted to use this library because it can do all these other things. Right. But we're never going to need to do any of those other things. And now we have like this divergence from a standard in how we actually do telemetry and log shipping.
Yeah, I guess to me though, that's a sign of a more junior engineer.
Oh, this was a senior
Because
engineer, actually.
I know, but I'm saying to me that's a sign of somebody who's more junior because they're not understanding that one, if someone tells you the exact tech stack they want to use and you didn't question it when they gave that to you, you didn't ask why then, it's not your job to then go just decide to go try something new and shiny. That's not how the job works. But it is your job when you first are assigned those requirements to go through and say, hi, where did these requirements come from? Let's have a conversation. Let's understand why these requirements are there. Because a lot of times there are cases, and I've been hearing a lot about some of them from some of my friends recently at one company that I talked to. They are getting requirements from product, but it's literally the requirements that the customer is giving them. But the customer doesn't know what they want. They say they want this. But then the engineer's job is to question and say, so why are we doing that? Why are we building this that way? Otherwise, you're reinventing the wheel, or you're not considering this solution, or you're not considering this possibility. And that's the conversation that should be had at the very beginning.
I agree. And that's actually one of the, what we oftentimes see, like, engineers are so exhausted with product because product, they're like, we want you to do this. Like, this is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
And the customer asks for something that's like unachievable. So I think it's like, I just want to say, like, everybody should be asking this question, like, why? So when the customer goes to product or the product talks to them, like, I want to be able to do this. I'm like, okay, well, like, what would this actually make easier for you? And this is why I'm always talking about like jobs and functions. It's like, what job are you trying to perform? What functions does that job satisfy?
Right.
And oftentimes when I'm talking about jobs, I'm like, okay, what jobs is a QA person trying to solve? And I'm like, well, the QA person, they just want to test the software. I'm like, no. The jobs are actually much more human at the end of the day. Like one job you want to perform is to go home happy.
Yeah.
And people kind of tend to forget that aspect. And that's why I was, thinking about the why from like all across is really helpful. But it's always like when an engineer has a requirements, they're going to be thinking like, why these specific requirements? Well, often teams would it be? And so that's why I said, like, I kind of call like the holistic view of like, kind of like jumping across like the whole spectrum, like what actually makes sense to build for us at this time. That's why with a platform engineering, we always say, we want to build things the right way at the right time with the right people. Is one of those things. And I think it's kind of like, that's why I was kind of dissenting when you're like, but engineers are so great and methodical and figuring things out. I'm like, go a bit sideways.
That's fair. Like, I guess maybe I just have a very very rosy view of engineers because the engineers that I engage with usually are like staff plus, and they spend a lot of time having those conversations that you're talking about. Not, I'm going to go chase the new shiny thing because it's fun and I get to go build the thing and I'm going to go future proof it to the nth degree and all that. No, they're usually much more down to earth and thinking things through.
Not me.
Who knows? Well, yeah, but we've already established that you don't have an engineering degree. So wait a second here.
Really?
I almost canceled this stream to go play with a new shiny technology. So
I know how you do things.
I would have had like Reg forever.
In my defense, I'm the only person responsible for my production infrastructure. So it's my sleep that I compromise every time I play with something shiny. So, and that's allowed.
There you go. Yeah. As long as you're not, giving somebody else the 2 a.m. pager.
Yeah, could you imagine that if someone hired me to help them build their Kubernetes platform and I was like, here's all these alpha softwares. Good luck. I'll see you later. I actually did that. I've done it a few times. I'm not as bad as that. But I was a big fan of Vector when it came out as an open source Rust-based collector project. I thought it was super cool. And then the big purple dog bought it and swallowed it up. And now I feel bad for any company I've left them with that. It's still open source and it's still maintained and I'm sure it's still good, but
Yeah, I remember last week we actually implemented Vector, and that was also one of the things. Like, actually, it's kind of a bit limited now, but it still works really well.
Yeah, very cool software.
Yeah. But because I have a question for you actually, because
Ooh.
one of the things that I was seeing in the cloud into space is people really drinking the Kubernetes Kool-Aid.
Yes.
Like it's
They
very much
do.
like people are going so hard on Kubernetes. And I look at it, I'm like, okay, I understand the benefits here and how it helps us, uh, but I don't find it as like the one size fits all solution. I'm not saying we should go back, to like running like virtual machines or instances and stuff like like truly and like basically running container on that. But I'm kind of curious what your opinion is on like where do you think like Kubernetes is not a good fit?
Ooh.
This isn't how this
Go ahead,
podcast
David.
works, Evelyn.
I'm turning the tables.
I mean,
So, I have been drinking the Kubernetes Kool-Aid now for 10 years, and I have everywhere I've went, I've brought it. And I used to try and not do that, but the needs always were there. And I always had really good story for when not to use it. So I'm going to answer it subjectively from that regard, but I think, and this is like my disclaimer, objectively in 2025, every company should be on Kubernetes because you're losing out on too much now because everything is now leaning towards Kubernetes native and all the examples are on Kubernetes. So even if you've just got a Java monolithic application, no, you should probably still run that in systemd, but whatever. Like if you go by Kubernetes, you do get log collection for free, right? And you can have GitOps for free, and you can have observability pipelines using Prometheus service monitors. For all this is for free because it's free to learn how to do it, and the examples are all there. But there's still the tax, right? You still pay a Kubernetes tax. But there are. So it's hard for me to say don't use Kubernetes because I really do think it's like you lose out in too much now because it is the de facto. But Java does not work well in containers. It's getting better. I think if you're on Java 21 or whatever, the latest and greatest is where it actually respects Linux secrets, you might have a good time. But prior to that, it was hell on earth. And the JVM just wasn't built to run that way. It does hop code path optimizations over weeks and months. Container-based workloads don't run for sometimes even days, never mind weeks or months. So like you lose a lot of the JVM performance tweaks by just not by doing Kubernetes. So I say Java's usually a good one not to put in containers. Now, with regards to not using Kubernetes, again, I'm struggling because I put everything in Kubernetes. Even if I've got single node clusters, I put stuff in Kubernetes just because I like the fact that it's a supervisor more than anything else and it handles configuration and secrets. Even though I don't do a lot of, I don't really even have that many 5-node clusters because I just run single node clusters everywhere. It's just so powerful. I'm the worst person to ask this question to. I'm really
see, yeah,
flapping.
I mean, it,
Yeah,
I
I
could.
really want to kind of like twist the needle a bit and see how you react.
I mean, the fact is so I'm probably the one who's a little more skeptical about Kubernetes being the solution for everything out of the two of us. Mostly because I I don't like the idea that something is becoming such a de facto standard that is really a terrible way to host a static site, as an example. Like, I don't need that much overhead. I'd rather not. I'd rather not have things that go and break all the time. That I had like there's all this complexity that Kubernetes brings in my mind that isn't always useful. It really depends on what you're building and why it's important that that's being built that way. Um, I don't see anything wrong with having a VM for something that is going to be long running, that is going to be doing something that needs to be basically functioning like a single bare metal machine. To me, that's really where like you're kind of trying to decide, do you want microservices? Yes, most cases right now are microservice based, but do you need it? Is it always going to be that way? There's some things that are just not going to work that way. One of the really classic examples I always think about are banks. The mainframes that they run for a lot of their heavy transactions really just do better to be left alone as more of a mainframe. Whether that's a true mainframe, like a more modern mainframe, or you're running on virtualization on hardware, to me, that is probably one of the bigger use cases that you don't need Kubernetes to be doing all of that. You don't need Kubernetes to be running all of those transactions all the time because you need it to be up and running And why go through the whole process of trying to move everything to Kubernetes because that's what everyone else does, or because it's the everything is easy to plug in? Are we getting back to the same question of, oh, well, this is what everybody else does, I'm going to just plug it in because I don't know how to do it any differently,
Yeah.
whether that's a
No,
bastard
yeah,
offspring.
I agree. And then this is sort of like where I'm like, I was like, someone's like, why do we need Kubernetes? You know, and like, or even like, why do we need to go all the way into microservices? Like, should we actually
Yeah.
instead go more towards like, intent driven, development of services?
Hmm.
Multiple. We don't really need to do. We don't really call them microservices at the end of the day. Now, so one of the reasons I've kind of been like, thinking about this. I'm like, oh crap, Kubernetes is everywhere. So I mentioned early on that like release management is one of the things I'm actually dealing with at the moment.
Hmm.
And the biggest pain point isn't the how do we do release management, it's how do we decouple CI from CD. Uh, as a lot of the time I see everything is basically like we're heavily integrated. We use CI systems to do all of our deployments. And we call things GitOps without really being GitOps at the end of the day. And that's actually where I see a lot of issues. We basically we tightly coupled, the definition of infrastructure with actually the application being deployed. And so one of the things I discovered when I was like, look at the landscape. I'm like, okay, what are the options, for purely CD solutions? And like 99% of them were all just like built around Helm, for example, or an Argo CD derivative.
Hmm.
And then like I stumbled upon like Helmless, which is using Google Run, I believe, behind the scenes. And I'm actually like very motivated to just like develop my own integration for AWS. And then just basically upset the entire cloud native spectrum just because they decided to do something that wasn't Kubernetes related. And that's kind of like one of the things where I'm like, I feel that uh, yes, everything is going towards Kubernetes, but not every use case actually makes sense for it. And but we still want to be container based. And that's where I kind of see this chasm perhaps, or this
Yeah.
disconnect of is, how do we actually do like, container driven solutions without immediately jumping straight into Kubernetes at the same time?
I mean, like right now I've been playing a bit with Podman and looking at that, and they're like Podman can do minor orchestration, I guess I can say. Like it's you can run multiple containers without necessarily thinking about adding an entire Kubernetes cluster underneath it, which is kind of fun to poke at. I don't know a ton about it in production, so
It also has
I've just mostly
quadlets,
been
which allows
looking
you
at.
to generate systemd unit
There
files
you go.
for Podman containers, which is also a really nice approach as well, as long as you're happy to stay on that kind of single node concept, which again, for most people is actually, it's fine. It's a good way of doing it, but then you have to learn all this stuff yourself. Like it's like, USB-C is everywhere. If you need to charge your phone, someone has a USB-C cable, right? And that's
Yeah.
Kubernetes in 2025. But the minute you say, oh,
Well,
well, I just want to run a quadlet that does MongoDB and I want to set up automatic backups and I want to do geo replication and stuff, like you're off the beaten path at that point. And that's why I generally think that most people should be looking at Kubernetes for most use cases, even though it's not the best approach. It's going to be the easiest in the longer run.
well, this is where I argue with you though. Is
No.
I'm serious.
I
Well,
have opened the can of worms. I'm so
I know,
happy.
but I guess my point is I'm coming back to where we started this whole conversation of how much are you willing to outsource to other people? How much are you willing to outsource to ChatGPT or to the experts at AWS or to wherever versus understanding how your system works and hosting your own stuff? There's lines. And what's the trade off here? I know, David, you're looking at it as trade off is Kubernetes, everybody has everything everywhere. There's all these integrations. It's easy to plug and play. Just go. I'm looking at, well, if I'm willing to hire the people who can figure this out, depends on the size of the company, depends on the size of the business, depends on what they're trying to do, depends on like specific use cases. Maybe you'd rather hire an expert to be able to do those things and not outsource that expertise outside of your organization. Again, do you want to hire or do you want to spend money? Do you want to buy Backstage or do you want to hire to build your own platform that works the best for what you're doing? I think it needs to be an informed choice. And that's kind of where I look at this is David, our classic argument of Laura looks at the business side of it, and David looks at the
I
tech
can't
side
believe
of
you
it.
brought this back to CapEx versus OpEx discussion. Come on.
Ha
No, CapEx.
I win. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, I mean, you're the one who brought up Rust earlier anyway.
But I
But
didn't.
I think, yes, you did. You mentioned a Rust collector. That was your fault.
Open telemetry
Uh,
collector. I never
you
said
said
Rust. I
Rust?
haven't said Rust today.
Yes, you did.
I did
Go
not
ahead.
hear Rust.
I heard the fact that it is a Rust-based system with vector.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's true. That's true. He did say that. That's true.
anyway, so getting back to the point, though, I think to me that's really the question that you need to think about is if you're looking at I have the money to spend and I can just outsource all of this to Kubernetes to whoever has it, to whoever can run it for me, etc. Fine. But if you're willing to take the time to invest in it, maybe it's a better choice for your platform. And that's kind of where I get back to it.
Yeah. No, and then I think it's totally fair because at the end of the day, you know, people who want to run containers, they don't actually care whether it's Kubernetes or something else. The one who cares about it is the one who actually like own and maintain it. And it's a question of, you know, how much you want to offload to another vendor to take care of it for you. Because I think there's so many, there are so many vendors that literally all they do, they just like, we just run Kubernetes for you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really honestly the other side of it, and that's kind of where I have been kind of looking at it like, okay, like is Kubernetes right fit? What? And actually, and then this even like kind of like turn the question back on myself. You know, I should also be asking myself the why of like why am I so hesitant to go towards Kubernetes? And it might just be because I've gotten so used to this high level of abstraction where everything's managed that now when I'm saying like, okay, I need to decouple CI from CD, okay, we actually need to stop defining application releases infrastructure as code. That means we be more dynamic and have a system where we can actually dynamically pick up what the current artifact is to deploy. I'm already spelling out Kubernetes just by describing that.
Yeah. You never know.
All right.
But
we need to schedule a follow-up in 3 months and see if you've got Kubernetes in production yet.
Anyway, but I was going to say, you know, I'm watching the time and unfortunately I think we are very close to time.
Yeah. Again, we're not very good at keeping to that 20-minute mark. We're at over 40 now. Yeah. But I mean, it's been fun. It's been so much fun.
I mean, my commute is 1 hour, so this is perfect for me.
There you go. There you go. See? We're okay.
All right. Anything else we want to discuss before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, I don't have any sales pitches, unfortunately.
That's okay. It's all good.
All right. Well, I mean, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk about Arc and platforming and, you know, the rise and fall of Kubernetes. You know, even though I've sat here and said that everyone should really adopt it in 2025, that doesn't mean I'm not keeping my eye over here going, oh, what's next? Like, because I don't think Kubernetes will be the thing that we are still running in 5 or 10 years' time. Maybe it'll just be Claude code agents doing containers. Who knows? But
oh, David.
Sorry, I'll see myself out.
Oh, you should. But thank you for coming. This was a really good episode. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, and I'm going to continue to be your reply gal in Blue Sky, just like responding to everything you post.
Yay! Woohoo! Thanks for joining us.
If you want to keep up with us, consider subscribing to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app, or even go to cloudnativecompass.fm.
And if you want us to talk with someone specific or cover a specific topic, reach out to us on any social media platform.
Until next time, when exploring the cloud native landscape, on 3?
On 3.
1, 2, 3. Don't forget your compass.
Don't forget your compass.